Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Folks, we have some breaking news for you today. It is so profound. It is so pervasive. And you're just not gonna believe what we have to tell you. So we wanted to make sure that before we did this little YouTube, the article had already been written and the research done. So if you look in the little box below the YouTube frame, you will see the article where you can then read everything that Thomas is going to give you a summary of. Because it's so unbelievable, you're going to go, there's no way. So you'll want to click on the article. Thomas, I don't want to take anything more from you. Tell me, what the heck is going on now?
Well, you're so right. It is breaking. It's heartbreaking. And it's something you'd see in National Enquirer. Because if somebody told you that they're going to name and show you the picture of Big Brother, who is in fact aggressively controlling all aspects of life at this very moment, you would say this is complete nonsense. Well, we would have said it's nonsense too, except Aim for Truth's Anonymous Patriots have been working with Americans for Innovation on this particular project because we were chasing down a thing called the QRS-11. And you saw articles on it, and we've done videos on it where we talk about this is how Hillary can bring down a plane. Yes, and we explained some of that, but we're going to have to go back and explain that more because it then evolved into the most bizarre thing we have ever found in our research, perhaps. And it's about patent espionage that has set up a patent even before 9/11 happened in expectation of 9/11, you could say, when you see this 170-page long patent, the longest patent that our patent attorneys and patent researchers have ever come across. And you will notice that it sets up everything for 9/11. And then afterwards, the very people who were involved with setting this master plan for Big Brother, you could call it a blueprint of domination, you could call it the complete digital control, remote control of all moving objects, and then right down even into human beings. How they intend to control, and they have a patent that's already been approved, that they intend to control us by implants, electronic implants that will actually control our muscles. It's like an off switch. And so when we started researching this, it came about because we didn't understand what Field McConnell was saying over at Able Danger about the uninterruptible autopilot. But what he was saying was that he had proof that the QRS-11 is in every airplane, basically. He's a pilot of long experience, and he found this device, and he realized that his plane could be taken over, and there's nothing he could do about it. So he researched it and found it was true, and then through his connections with his own sister and other amazing connections, he's put out what is called the Able Danger site. So as we were looking at this, we thought, oh, Hillary's connected to this somehow. Hillary Clinton and Rose Law Firm. Hillary's dad, who was a mob boss in Chicago, I'm sure turned to her and said, hey, why don't you become a patent lawyer? They make the most money. And she did. And she became a specialist in infringement of patent law. Now, when someone's studying infringement, that's because they're studying criminal activity. You'd be protecting someone from criminal activity. So Rose Law Firm in Little Rock, Arkansas became the center of patent espionage that has basically controlled Silicon Valley, that has all been distilled down into one patent controlled by one person. His name is Richard Walker. You'll see his picture at the top of the article. And this person worked for Hewlett-Packard for a number of years, and then somehow made a dozen patents that he gave to Hewlett-Packard, which is interesting. That's in history, that's probably never happened. And then he branched off from Hewlett-Packard to create a new company called Agilent. And Agilent then broke off into 4 or 5 other companies that have military contracts. And it opened up, even before it became a public company, with $2 billion worth of investments from the same criminals who invested in Facebook, who invested in Google, who invested in Instagram, who invested in all of these Silicon Valley startups, which then became huge. And we're going to explain why. We've explained why that happens. And we've explained the venture capital operation called the Highlands Forum, or the Highlands Group. And they control DARPA, the Department of Defense's Advanced Research Project Agency, which controls most innovation that we've had, both in the medical field and in almost all fields. The greatest innovations we have in our modern time came through DARPA. Well, the CIA got jealous. They created their own group called In-Q-Tel, and then they decided to coordinate the two groups with the Highland Forum, which is a secret group, never really technically meets. There are no notes. You can't talk about what happens during it, but basically that is controlled. The weaponization of the world. And every digital device can be a weapon. We need to point that out. It can not only be a tracker, an antenna for broadcasting and receiving, but it can also program, and it can control, which is pointed out in these patents. But we have to go back a way to get the foundation for this story, or else you cannot understand it. You will not believe it. And when you do get the story told to you, it will be the same story we've been telling. Do the names Larry Sumner, Stephen Crocker, Robert Mueller, James Comey, James Chandler, Hillary Clinton, Daddy Bush, George H.W. Bush, Herbert Walker Bush, and Rod Rosenstein, and David Kapos, Do those names sound familiar? They are a cluster of people since the early 90s from Little Rock, Arkansas, controlled patent and intellectual property, because James Chandler was not only on the National Security Council at one point, but he was also the number one person creating laws that controlled patents. And so his law of economic espionage, the Economic Espionage Act in the mid I think it was 1996, don't quote me on that, but that act, as well as other acts controlling intellectual property, set the foundation for James Chandler to control patents in America. But they could see that this one patent that came out of Little Rock, Arkansas, literally, and I think legitimately through a man named Hafele, Ralph Hafele, Hafle, he invented a thing that became a gyroscope using a quartz crystal tuned to the antenna towers of radio stations. So it was a broadcasting and receiving antenna tuned to the same frequency that antennas of those days, radio stations, were through quartz, and still are. That particular frequency it's like a homing device, it's a control device, it's a broadcasting device, and it was put on every airplane. It was put on the airplane so they could get their location, and they could understand if they were in any danger of hitting an antenna tower or where they were at, finding their location and their altitude. So to begin with, this little invention was rather radical, but what it did was the following. It caused that cluster of people I just named to start working out of Rose Law Firm as the center, not only for patents, but for also, before the days of DARPA and In-Q-Tel, they had to control devices from IBM, computers, and devices that people wanted to get onto the internet, or they wanted to take what at that time was called the DARPAnet and extend it to Europe by cable. They had to build in backdoors. And so the myth of a clipper chip was born into people looking at it as one way of trying to say that all of the microchips from Intel and from all other microchip processors, microchip producers in this country had to have a backdoor put on them. Now we know that they don't even have a backdoor anymore. It can be done with simply code, because there's a microprocessor writing on top called the ME on the Intel processor. That's what's causing the whole issues of meltdown and Spectre, and they're all freaking out because it's all being found out. That's why Facebook is going, oh my gosh, I heard Zuckerberg say I think it was yesterday, he said, the government should have told all of you what they were doing with Facebook from the beginning.
Well, he's a little worried that he might be called to testify in Congress, and everybody's going to see that he's a buffoon, fool, and just a dullard.
He's just like Richard Walker, the man who wrote a patent that controls the QRS-11, which controls all moving objects basically at this point with humans in it. That would be planes, trains, boats, cars, motorcycles.
Driverless cars. Let's not forget that.
Driverless cars.
Can they work my vacuum cleaner and I don't have to do it anymore? That would be great.
As long as you have a wireless connection to your vacuum cleaner, the Internet of Things can be controlled by this, the ultimate control center of this device. They call it the point focal node. And we're going to tell you where that point focal node probably is. It's located in more than likely 3 different places, and there's a battle to see who gets to control this system.
I have to say, before you continue on, I was absolutely shocked when Sarah Huckabee Sanders said that her child, she has one of those devices in her home. I'm not sure if it was an Alexa. It was one of those devices that they pick up your voice and then, sends it to Big Brother, so to speak. And her son was saying something about Batman. The next thing she knows, there's a Batman figure at her door that she had ordered through this device. Hello, Sarah. Somebody tell Sarah to understand that these dishwashers can hear you talk.
I just got to watching a long video on that. Again, there's so many proofs of this, but this one had many proofs in it. That your phone, even if it's turned off, can be listened to by Google, by Facebook, by Instagram, by Snapchat, by anything you're doing that is a subroutine of what we're talking about, which is the basis of the internet. Let's go back to that. The basis of the internet is a DARPA program called Memex. Google and all search engines are based on that. To get a copy of that open source, you had to build in a backdoor, a kill switch, and a remote control possibility, as they say, for your own health and for the safety and welfare of the computer and you and everybody else. You actually sign agreements to this again and again. Every time you say, I agree, those hundreds and hundreds of page-long user agreements that you just signed allow them to do all of this. It's perfectly legal. But the point is, back in the early days, it was the same old people who, through IBM, which is basically a monopoly for the government, just like AT&T was and Bell Lab, in the early days, the government loved to use industrial barons, commercial corporate barons, to run things. They just handed things over to them. They still do. But now what happened was you saw Bush, and remember, when you say Clintons are the adopted children of the Bush family. So when the Clintons came to power after all their corruption down in Arkansas, where they laundered money for the housing and urban development to the tunes of billions and tens of billions of dollars, when they ran their secret Iran-Contra scandal drugs for guns through Mena, Arkansas, when they, Whitewater, where, they get off, but everybody else goes to jail except one person who dies, I mean, if you just look at their corruptions, it's astounding. It's absolutely astounding. Their Clinton Foundation, they got around their library by creating a foundation before the library was created. That's why they can have 36 foundations and initiatives, all of which are supposedly tax-free, but they actually take all the money. They've been doing this from the beginning. But Hillary Clinton is a patent attorney. So she was trained by James Chandler, who was basically the person in control of it. He moved someone, David Kapos, over from IBM, who'd been at IBM for 22 years, to be the head of the patent department. And then they controlled the patents from then on. If you didn't agree to build in the back doors, the kill switches, and the remote controls, you didn't get a patent. Now, why is that? How could that possibly be true? And how could such industrial espionage been going on involving politicians and elected officials and the government agencies? The people I named, look, James Comey, where's he now? Where's Robert Mueller now? Where's Rod Rosenstein now? Matter of fact, I just found out that Mary Jacoby, the wife of Glenn Simpson, was in on these meetings from the beginning down in Little Rock, Arkansas. So patent theft was literally an industry controlled by the Bush family cartel and has been to this very day. And so Leader Technologies, their social networking IP, intellectual property, and their what do they call it? Their trade secrets and some of their copyrights, and what would have been a patent, except why didn't it become a patent? Why didn't the person who invented social networking and the company that invented it get the credit for it? Because James Chandler stole it. And he stole it before it became a patent. But it wouldn't have mattered. If it had become a patent, they would have stolen it anyway. It's legal to take a patent for national defense or national security issues. So anything that can be weaponized will be stolen. So if you make a patent And in any way the military can use it, and it can be weaponized, it will be taken from you. You get no recompense. If you continue to do it, they charge you $10,000 each time. If you try to bring a lawsuit, that's a $10,000 fine. And if you try to continue your project, you can go to jail. That's patents in America. It's one of the worst things going on. And we are now all controlled, whether we like it or not, in America. And I say all because even if you don't have a cell phone, you got cell phone towers raying microwaves through you and high frequency electromagnetic frequencies through your body all the time. So whether you like it or not, you are being bombarded. You are not necessarily targeted for surveillance until the moment that they use one of the NSA, CIA, FBI software packages that we've heard about in Vault 7 called Tor, or we've heard about called Open Source Works, or as Peter Thiel, who is another Silicon Valley cutout, just like Richard Walker, the man who has the patent for Big Brother control of everything, including your dog and your cat and trees. They intend to put sensors on all trees so that they can track you at all times. And as you walk by them, in the patent are the designs for controllers to either have eyeglasses on or a headset or a helmet on and a belt. And that belt reads the devices they put in you. And if your vaccines are not up to date, they say in the patent, that person, that police officer, will simply turn and give you your vaccine right there on the street because you don't have your vaccines up to date. Now, if there's a malfunction, holy cow, can you imagine what happens with the system when there's a malfunction?
Look, I know this may seem outrageous to some folks just listening, and they're going, oh my God, this is like a huge conspiracy theory. Folks, it is not. Read the article. The patent numbers are there. The designs are there. Now, let's go back to Richard Walker.
Richard Walker, when he left HP, he just became a Silicon Valley cutout, and his company opened, they gave him $2 billion to open a company because of this patent. So if you think this is a conspiracy, let me tell you, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and all the different investors, all the insider investors, including judges, which there's always judges on these insider trading for Silicon Valley companies that they know are going to get military industrial contracts with no bids in most cases. And then they'll be supported and valuated at such a high value that when it goes public, all these companies from Facebook to Instagram to Google, when it happened, all of them, Twitter, all of them have the same people investing in them. Then it goes public and they go from being millionaires to billionaires. And the second that they're allowed, and in some cases they build in laws to allow them to get out quickly, the second they're allowed, they get out when it goes to billions because they know what? They know that Facebook is fake. Facebook doesn't make all that money from commercials, ads.
Of course not. Anybody who believes that really,
Facebook is a psyops experience.
Yeah.
Now, this patent, let me read to you the name of this patent. It is called LoJack Protocol. Can you imagine? What does that make you think of? LoJack, right? Whoa, this is back in 90s before 911. They had this all planned. So they were thinking of the LoJack, which you used to put in your car and then they could find it. Or it wouldn't be stolen. They could turn it off.
Right. Well, WO would be world. I know. I'm just playing with you. But what is it?
WO,
yes,
in this case, stands for War Ops.
Okay.
In other words, war operations. So it should read the War Operations Jack Protocol, total accountability for aggressive remote control and PFN data distribution. PFN is a point of focal node, which means a collection center. And then they show planes and they show everything in the world you can imagine. Bicycles, everything, human beings, pets, information from the internet, information from the FBI, the CIA, from information from all of the different credit companies, your bank accounts, everything. We have been saying that this was in the works and that Eric Schmidt had called it your profile. We're calling it the digital black box. They wish to get you in the black box and they control everything. But they're going to have inserts into you. They're going to have control. These inserts are the same things that DARPA is funding. What you think is fantastic medical research, isn't it nice that DARPA has worked out a wireless way for people to put a helmet on their head and control a robotic arm. Isn't that wonderful? Now, turn that into a weapon, because it was weaponized before it was given to the medical industry. So what does it intend to do? That's right. You will have an implant that can tell your muscles not to work. In other words, you will have an off switch. And they call you wetworks. They don't even call you a human in this patent. You are what's called wetworks. Now, as you know, in sci-fi and in the projections of transhumanism and tech, super tech, they talk about being able to put a chip directly into your neural system by creating a neural network interface and some type of interface for the device, so that you can just plug in a little chip and you'll know how to fly a Cobra helicopter. Or you plug in a chip and you will be able to speak a language or whatever. It doesn't matter. That's what they intend. That's what is called wetworks. It's not happening yet, but there are very close and similar things to it. But all of those inventions, whether from DARPA, In-Q-Tel, from Leidos, or wherever it comes from any industry, it has to have a patent. And if it's got a patent, it's going to be controlled by this group. And this group is worse than the Department of Defense and the Board of Broadcasting Governors, and the point of focal note I'm going to tell you about called the Global Engagement Center, which has every toy and trick to be able to surveil, target, and attack. In other words, the Department of Defense, because of Obama allowing the Department of Defense to work inside of America and consider all cyber fields of activity to be what they call war theaters. And we are all hostile actors in war theaters. So anytime you're on the internet, you're not in America. And you are being surveilled. And every time you push a key, you are broadcasting. And every time you do practically anything with electronics, you are broadcasting, so that now the Department of Defense can surveil you, target you, and neutralize you if they wish.
Before you go too far, an image arises that they keep wanting us to look at artificial intelligence and robots and how robots are going to become more human. But in actuality, this wetware situation is taking our own flesh and blood, putting chips in us, and creating the robot within a flesh and blood framework. So they want us to look one way, but we better start looking at this other way.
They want us to be controllable cyborgs, transhumans. They don't want us to be uncontrollable. They want to turn off our switches, and the 0-day switch, the kill switch. And they want, what do they call it? Total aggressive remote control for everything. Now, this isn't just in America, because the QRS 11 by the top lawyer in the Rose law firm down in Little Rock, Arkansas, right there with Hillary Clinton, took it to France and the rest of the world. So the whole world is using this device, and it's all controlled by the lawyers of Rose law firm. And later, many, many other devices were created by Ralph Baffley, and some of them came into the hands of Hillary Clinton herself through a company called Systematec.
Who is Ralph Baffley? Because earlier you said his name was Ralph Hafley.
Hafley. Did I say Baffley?
You said, yes. I just
Hafle.
Right.
Hafley.
Hafley. Okay.
Ralph Hafley. So Hillary's law firm was representing him as the company changed from BEI Electronics to BEI Technology to Sensata to Systematec. But the point is, the control devices that can bring down a plane and could have brought down any of the planes headed towards the trade centers.
7 out of 10. That's what Q says.
Pardon me?
Oh, never mind.
And by the way, QRS 11, and now they're
but that stands for quartz resonance.
It stands for quartz resonating
or something like that.
Sensor,
Yeah,
and
sensor.
it's now in the iteration of instead of 11, it's 14.
Well, they call you Thomas Q. Paine,
I am a pain in the rear of the globalists, and I'm very proud of it. And Q, in this case, stands for questioning, because we are questioning why no one is doing anything about the most pervasive patent ever written by this Richard Walker under the guise of a system to help us with control, safety, emergency. If a bus is out of control, mind you, folks, they know that they can go in and turn that bus off without a driver and overriding the driver. Now that sounds like a really good thing, doesn't it? Or that there's an airplane that's headed towards the World Trade Center and its transponder is turned off for an hour and 20 minutes, and Dick Cheney has every single intercept airplane on the entire East Coast in 3 separate war fighting experiences up in Alaska. Dick Cheney, who was in control of 911, made sure there was not a single aircraft that could defend the trade centers from planes that had their transponders turned off, one of them for over an hour and 20 minutes. Here's the deal. He could have gone in from the bunker he was in and brought the plane down, or just taken it over and landed it through remote control. So to say planes hit the World Trade Center while we're having war games, the biggest war games with the Air Force in American history, and that we didn't have any capacity to take down the planes that were flying all over as a gigantic menace, and Dick Cheney ignored them and said, ignore the blips on the screen, ignore the blips on the screen. That's the testimony you really want to look at, folks, because we know now that the blueprint for what was the crazy myth of terrorism, which would then be controlled by who? Robert Mueller, who became the head of the FBI, who actually had been elected a few weeks before 911, but he had to have his appendix out.
Not elected. He's not elected.
Well,
he was confirmed or appointed. Yeah.
He was appointed and confirmed. So he is, in my opinion, a Congress-elected, corrupt person who was there.
Of course they put somebody in charge that was corrupt. They got to cover up all their crimes.
He had to cover it up, but hello. He knew of these devices years and years in advance. He was in on the committee that made sure that they progressed to the point that we would be able to have a complete U.S. and perhaps even global dominance of the world through remote control, aggressively remote control the world. That means economics, it means America, and it means through the United Nations, the dream of George Herbert Walker Bush will come to pass, that the New World Order will now have an arm that can control everything. And if you don't like it, we'll bring your planes down. We'll turn them off. We know that the Chinese had done this with certain chips and certain...
And my gosh, every house now, almost, not every, have smart meters. That's just monitoring us.
Oh, absolutely. Wireless everywhere.
Yeah.
So the Chinese chips had to be taken out of all of the military planes and missiles and everything. And remember that QRS-11 isn't all the nuclear missiles too. It's the number one gyroscope in the world, and it's top secret, except Hillary has it. How many people's planes have crashed who were so close to Hillary getting ready to testify?
And cars that went off the road.
Oh, cars that the steering locks up and that the throttle goes to full acceleration. Oh, that's what a QRS-11 can do.
Well,
it can take over steering, it can take over acceleration.
I can see why Larry Nichols is a little concerned about his safety.
Anyone near the Clintons and the Bushes should be very concerned about their safety, but the Bushes particularly, because they were so sloppy, and they're just so sloppy in what they do. Like, it took us a minute. We had to follow some leads, but once we followed the leads, it all led to this, that Agilent, another Silicon Valley cutout cardboard company, is nothing more than IBM's Eclipse Foundation that stole Leader Technologies' social networking IP, is controlled not by some mysterious deep state government. It's controlled by about a dozen people, and they're the same people involved in Uranium One, $2 billion going into the Clinton Foundation, the Frank Justra's complete fraud with Uranium One, which we've gone into, and I don't know why they don't look at that. And by the way, Hillary, if she accepted a single penny, one penny, while she was Secretary of State, one single penny, had she had someone put a penny in her pantsuit, she should be convicted of a crime. Because it does not take pay to play or intent to commit an emolument crime, emolument act crime. We know she accepted $2 billion, and a lot of it while she was Secretary of State. It doesn't have to be pay to play. Nobody has to prove that she accepted money to allow Uranium One to happen. That's stupid. Stupid. And any lawyer who can't convict Hillary Clinton is not a lawyer and needs to go pump gas or something, but get a different job. And anyone who can't see through this cabal, let's just not even call it a cabal. This is the Bush family. Mafia.
It's just a national mafia.
And Obama is trying to be just like the Clintons. He has played right into their game, and he's trying to be as big or bigger than them. And remember, he's learned in mafia school in Chicago. That's the best place in the world to learn about the mob and political control and Marxist control, Saul Alinsky, the whole thing, the corrupt political campaign funding through Chicago. It is historic. Rahm Emanuel, the number one Jewish fundraiser, corrupt fundraiser in America. Okay, but don't get me upset.
But all roads lead to the Attorney General.
It leads right to Hillary Clinton, who was at that moment saying, George H.W. Bush, I know you got enriched through the Uranium Enrichment Corporation because you brought in the uranium from Russia for 20 years and you gave them our entire uranium industry. My man, Bill Clinton's going to go over with Frank Giustra and we're going to get the biggest uranium contract ever because we're going to be given hundreds of millions of dollars just for a couple meetings we arranged with Frank Giustra and the head of Kazakhstan and Putin. Okay. That's what really happened. $200 million on a single day to the Clinton-Giustra Sustainability Growth Initiative. Nobody's looking at that. That is corruption beyond imagination.
Well, of course, when you have attorney generals like Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch, they are sitting there to make sure none of us know about it. But what's the excuse for Jeff Sessions?
I am so glad you said that. Eric Holder is part of the group too.
Oh yeah,
and Loretta Lynch at that time was
and
over
Susan
in the corrupt
Rice
New York.
And Valerie Jarrett, the whole group.
Well, Valerie got in later with them because she's Chicago mob.
Well, she's also background with Muslim Brotherhood. She was just watching her man Obama.
Are you kidding?
Keeping him checking rain.
Valerie Jarrett.
And where is she now? Sitting in someplace in Washington, waiting for the big coup to happen?
She's in a bunker, but because of alternative news, she's been pushed back into her bunker.
Good, y'all keep pushing.
Don't forget. Push. I'm going to tell you in just a minute. This invention, the Big Brother patent, is called the PFN. As I said, that's the focal node, and then it TRAC, TRAC, and that's basically remote aggressive control, trusted remote aggressive control. Who is now in control of that? Where is the U.S. digital service that Obama and Eric Schmidt set up for $1.5 billion and during the election ran the attacks against Trump out of the White House? It moved out of the White House. Where do you think it is? You betcha. In Obama's house, where Valerie Jarrett hasn't left, where she has more security than the president had. Certainly more security than Michelle Obama. Why? Because she is a mobster. And she is looking at this. And don't forget, ex-presidents continue to have their clearance and they get the presidential briefs each day. That's the reason Trump ignores the intelligence briefs, because he knows that they go straight to Obama.
Would you? If 17 intelligence agencies gave you a report, Thomas, right here, would you believe it?
Hillary Clinton still has her clearance and was quoting her clearance and breaking her clearance during the debates when she said 17 agencies had all agreed. Who told her that? She doesn't have clearance to receive the presidential information, the daily briefing. That's what she was quoting. You see, so what we have here is this most astounding corruption we've ever seen in history. But why? It's perfectly legal. This is industrial espionage. We are nothing more than wetworks. We are nothing more than targeted commercial surveilled and targeted commercial actors. They want to control us. They want to control what you buy, what you think, so that you don't react to the government, so you stay part of the political program and believe in the two-party system and believe that voting actually counts and that you are making a difference. That's what they want to make you believe.
They're just, listen, it's worse than that. They feed on us in every possible way. They use children in horrific ways. They use slave labor and human trafficking. They use the human body for their awful experiments that we read about that are just too horrendous for me to put up on American intelligence media truth news headlines each day. Thomas, they use us in so many ways. They use our labor. They keep us in debt chains. And then on top of that, they want to use all of our money, make sure we have to spend it all, spend it on things that we don't necessarily choose, like that stupid Obamacare. Why should I have to pay for this? And why in the world was Roberts up there in the Supreme Court changing the stupid legislation for Congress to make it work? I mean, all they want to do is use us, and finally, in the end, they take away the very spirit of man, so we are extinguished.
Yes, and we've warned of that, and Eric Schmidt is the number one person doing that. He's gone out of control. He's already figured out, and it's already in place, to have your digital box where you get your entertainment, you get your sports, you get what you want, you get your questions answered from Google, but they give you one answer. They do not allow you to surf the net. They do not allow freedom. That's what it's. That's what's coming.
I'll be locked down. Can you give us any kind of ways out, things that we might be able to do?
Sure. Trump can go into the patent office and clean it up. That would take care of everything.
Oh my gosh, if they saw him coming, Thomas, I would think it would be war.
Well, it is war.
Because
they know
this
it's
is their war room.
Okay, who is the patent office now? The patent office has extended itself to Silicon Valley and the military-industrial complex. So the tech complex, the tech warlords. Let's remember, Glass-Steagall was rescinded at the same time so that these guys could have the investment bankers have insider trading. So they would get money from a bank, and then the investor traders would invest, or they would give them the money, or they'd fake it. They were enriching themselves through this, and that's Glass-Steagall. Get rid of it. That's insane. It's guaranteed insider trading. Okay, so we have to simply do a few things. First off, we have to realize this is happening and stop playing like it isn't. We have been yelling all of this stuff and writing it in our Anonymous Patriot articles for years. We need to wake up to the fact this is happening. That is the reason that Facebook is going down, Google is going down, Instagram is going down, Twitter is going down. Mm-hmm. They all have to go down to hide their crimes. If we bring back Leader Technology's original social networking plan, it basically gives everything either for so cheap or it's almost free, and the government becomes enriched by the process and no one is surveilled. That's what we're putting forth, the Miller Plan. If Trump did that and he cleaned up the patent office, got all of the government agencies out of there, DARPA, In-Q-Tel, Leidos, IBM, and all of those that came out of the IBM Eclipse Foundation, which would be all of social networking, YouTube, Gmail, all of those, and all the ones that went through Uri Milner to Russia, through James Breyer to China, from James Chandler to South America. These were all a small group of people who became unbelievably wealthy.
And not to mention the free energy devices that are out there that the patent office has also sabotaged or taken for themselves or suppressed from the people. Now, of course, that will totally shift the petrochemical industry in the world, but there are free energy devices that we could put in place right now and help people all around the world.
That's also true for health.
Health, everything. It's all being suppressed, people, right there in the corrupt, very corrupt U.S. Patent Office and all of the filthy, slimy, corrupt attorneys that are connected to it all throughout the United States.
And all throughout the U.S., the military, top secret corporations, everything, there's a company called Serco, S-E-R-C-O. They now control the patent office. So they run interference for anyone trying to get a patent. And if there's anything good, they shuffle it over to a small committee made of members of DARPA, In-Q-Tel, Highlands Forum, the Department of Defense, and then they look at it, and if they want it, they weaponize it, then they turn it into open source, because once they turn it into open source, it has the back doors, the remote, the kill switch, it's all built in. And that's being, who's Serco? That's pretty much Britain. Britain still...
It's the Queen.
It goes back, basically...
Who has allegiance to the Pope?
Well,
the Knights of Malta?
Well, yes, that...
Oh, we're going all the way, Thomas, in the end. Once we clean this swamp, we're taking it worldwide.
But we now have new knights. These are knights of economic patent terrorism. And James Chandler is the new pope. Because if the laws don't work, he's a lawyer. He just changes the law. He gets acts passed with unanimity. Nobody gets unanimous acts passed, but he does. He wrote executive orders. He basically created the atmosphere of this criminal espionage, enterprise that the Bushes have been enriched from. For a while, they were interested in oil. Then they went to gold. Then it went to tech. And when it went to tech, it went crazy. Because now they want to control us with the tech. Not only control the economy and control us, as you pointed out, on a prison planet with our taxes and so on and so forth. Matter of fact, you never own your house. You have to keep paying taxes. If you don't pay taxes, they take it from you.
Yeah.
You don't own anything in America, basically, that can be taxed.
A metaphor to this is the movie Soylent Green. Soylent Green. Because in the end, we just became feed for those that are that think that they're higher beings than we are.
In this system, we're wet works. We're not even humans. And we can't control our safety and our emergencies and our well-being. So they are going to implant these devices, which will monitor us at all times, and if necessary, make us stop and drop to the ground.
Well, we're just living a sci-fi nightmare.
Well, if they have wet-worked microchips in your brain, they could simply set off a frequency that could make you go to sleep or drop to the ground or die, whatever. If you're driving a car, then you wreck. How many of these things have happened that were so suspicious? Well, now we know how it happens. We know who was used as the, what do they call it, boy kings of Silicon Valley. His name was Richard Walker. And this all stemmed from probably a great genius, Ralph Hafney. Did I say it right that time? Hafley. Ralph Hafley down in Little Rock, who gave good old Hillary Clinton the idea that her dad was right. You know, who he was a mob boss from Chicago. So she went down there and she got into being a patent attorney, and look at her now. People give her billions and she gets away with it even when she's the Secretary of State. No crime is too big for her. No crime is too big for her to have impunity. No breaking of any security agreement is too big for her not to do it and then say the same story. All these things have been debunked and I've already proven that didn't happen. Now I'm moving on. Unbelievable. But folks, it's the same group of people. So when we are looking at what's happening with Trump, we see the same group of people attempting to apply their pressure. They were just about ready to put Big Brother digitally into place. And yes, they would have taken your guns. And yes, the UN would have taken over America. And yes, you would have implants in you. And yes, Eric Schmidt's black profile of you, or what I call your digital box, would be the only place you could go. They would feed you what they wanted you to know, and basically we'd become a North American Union, exactly as Hillary and actually Bill Clinton himself had planned. And remember what Hillary Clinton said, don't you worry about a thing. As soon as I get into the White House, I'm putting our economy in the hands of the best person who's already proven it and is the best person. No one is better than Bill Clinton to run our economy. An impeached president, a man who lost his law license, a man who was involved in more crimes than we can name, and that's who's going to be in charge of our economy. Why? Because the economy was already overthrown through the Treasury Department, through the Exchange Stabilization Fund, and through the Plunge Protection Team. We've already gone into that. So that's already controlled. Everything is controlled. There's no free market. There's no inventions. And again, we have to give a shout out to Americans for Invention. If you haven't looked at their site, look at it. If you haven't looked at Able Danger's site.
Americans for Innovation.
Did I say that wrong?
Yes.
Americans with the number 4, Innovations. They kind of represent, in a way, the leaders in the alternative news for leaders technology.
Well, for patent theft and the corruption. And his timeline is absolutely amazing.
So we haven't found anything bigger than this. Unless you understand patent law, you can't believe this. But the deal is someone can write a general patent, and this patent said that he is going to control the nodal point, the focus point of the whole system, which CIA fed into, which NSA fed into, which the FBI fed into, which all economics fed into, which your banks fed into. And this nodal point, where was it? That was what we had pointed out had become the Ministry of Truth, called the Global Engagement Center. And I mentioned this a minute ago. They can go in and they can target anyone and they can do anything to you. They can through your phone put you to sleep by sending out a vibration. They already have this on Humvees. They used them in Iraq. They can just target a group of people, send a vibration. They either go to sleep, their brain seems like it's on fire, they think they're dying, or they can die simply by a vibration. And that comes through your phone even if your phone's off. So don't think for a minute that this is some kind of joke, conspiracy. This is an intent to put the New World Order into place And this was the machinery to do it. And a patent that is general like this one, written by Richard Walker in the late 1990s. When he left HP and was working for Agilent, and now that company has become worth billions and billions, and they, like every other Silicon Valley cutout, they spawn other companies that are worth more than they are somehow magically overnight. But anyway, Richard Walker is not the person. He's just the front person for this. But what we're saying is that patent said they were going to do all of this. We already know they did it with the QRS-11 or QRS-14 now. We already know they did it through what we found out from Vault 7, that the NSA surveils everyone, that everything is going in there. We know that because we saw the Office of Personnel Management had a breach. It wasn't a hack. And all the information of every government employee was stolen. And then we had Equifax and other companies had fantastic breaches, and all that information was stolen. That went into this thing called the P&F TRAC, into this one patent. And therefore, everything that is invented from that point on that fits into that patent has to get permissions and get certificates from that patent. That patent owns the right to own and control aggressive remote control of everything that moves, as well as humans, animals, and even trees and things in the environment, as well as, of course, there's cameras everywhere. So that would be buildings too, and you're being watched at all times. And facial recognition now, and the fact that they can perceive all kinds of things. I just read about something yesterday that is so amazing. They can use a Doppler effect, send it out, it hits you, and when it comes back, it tells whether or not you are faking your emotions. So if you're a liar and a cheater and a criminal, there is about a 20% chance you might get away with it, but in general, if you
unless you're Hillary Clinton.
Unless you're Hillary Clinton, you get hit by one of these waves, it comes back and it says you're a liar. They can pull you over. And then with their helmet, they can see if there's any problems with your vaccinations, any problems with your bank account, any problems with your traffic record, any problems that you ever had. We're talking about a total 100% police state that is legal, that was approved by the United States Patent Office. So, folks, we're going to have other conversations with people on this because the topic is so huge. This is no joke. Read the article. Go to the patent, look at it yourself. And if you're not scared by the 30 or 40 pictures they have showing how they're going to take control of everything, which means they now said it first, they get the right, and they did it before 9/11, that's how we got into a terrorist police state. That's why the U.S. Patriot Act was passed. That's why Robert Mueller, who was part of this in the early 90s, then had to become the person who covered it up at the FBI. That's why Rod Rosenstein had to become who he was at the Justice Department. Let the attorney come and go. That's why Eric Holder was the Attorney General, head of the Justice Department. He knew all this was coming. He was part of it. He had already gotten paid for it when the companies went public. These people became filthy rich. Check their offshore accounts, not Paul Manafort and Rick Gates' offshore accounts. Check this small group of people's offshore accounts. What you'll find is the Clintons have 36 foundations and initiatives to hide all of their wealth. Same would be true of all the other people I mentioned. Take this seriously. We're sorry to have to say it, but it can be corrected simply. Trump has to go in and reinstate, as he did with the intelligence laws. Remember when he said he wanted a report from Dan Coates in 30 days on the intelligence community and how to correct unmasking and surveillance? He also said we're going back to the previous laws. Exactly what the Anonymous Patriots had recommended is exactly what he is doing, to the exact years when we said that's when it went wrong. He's going back to that. He can do the same with the Patent Office. He can go back to before 1993 when IBM started putting backdoors, or what is euphemistically or conspiratorially called the Clipper chip. But we know these things all exist. It can all be corrected. He corrected the Chinese chip problem. He corrected the problem with Chinese, correcting the problem with North Korea. He's correcting the problem with Iran, with Syria.
And we have to get all of the Silicon Valley stuff cleaned up. These boys need to leave that. And we need to take the technology and give it back to the people. That's what Michael McKibben at Leader Technologies designed this to be something that was used for the good of humanity. And we happen to know this man. He is such a moral, upright, decent human being. Never in his wildest imagination would he use this technology to work against the people like it has become.
And the people who stole it from him, Sheryl Sandberg, Larry Sumner's, Uri Milner, all of those people are still getting filthy rich. Peter Thiel, they all knew ahead of time.
Eric Schmidt.
And what did they
Zuckerberg.
do? They are now getting out of their own businesses, their most lucrative businesses, when they're the highest numbers in the stock market. Peter Thiel sells most of his stock over 4 or 5 different sales. Facebook owners, Sheryl Sandberg, Larry Sumner's, they've gotten out. Uri Milner, they got out. Why did they get out? Because they know it's fake. They know that the government runs it as a psyops, as a psychological operations. It is an experiment. It is a military utility. It is a weaponized experiment that has gotten out of control. And now that commerce is done on the internet, the Treasury Department will not allow it to collapse. But we can close Google, Facebook, and all the others. The bosses are getting out. The owners are getting out. So should the rest of us.